state, and local resources to dismantle public safety threats and eliminate the presence of criminal organizations that threaten our state and neighborhoods.
640 arrests, 24 confirmed deaths during enforcement operations, more than 3 tons of narcotics seized, and at the center of it all, a network so deeply embedded in Minneapolis that it had transformed an entire region into a logistics hub for one of the most dangerous cartels on earth. This is not a story about street gangs. This is a story about what happens when organized crime purchases access to power, when badges become shields for criminals, and when an entire city government becomes complicit in the suffering of its own people. If you think you understand how deep corruption can go, I promise you, the next part is worse. Let me take you back to where it truly began. 4:17 a.m. South Minneapolis, January 14th. The temperature had dropped to 9 degrees below zero. Fog drifted across the empty streets like something alive, curling around lampposts and settling into the gaps between parked cars. The city was asleep, but federal agents had been awake for 72 hours straight, running final coordination checks for what would become the largest simultaneous raid operation ever conducted in the upper Midwest. FBI, DEA, ICE, and DHS tactical units had positioned themselves around 14 separate locations across Minneapolis and its suburbs. SWAT teams in unmarked vehicles sat with engines idling, breath fogging inside their helmets. Overhead, a single surveillance helicopter maintained radio silence, its thermal cameras painting the ground below in shades of blue and white. The operation had a name, code name Halcyon, and its target was not a single building or a single suspect. Its target was an empire. At 4:32 a.m., the green light came through encrypted channels. Simultaneously, across the city, breaching charges detonated. Steel doors buckled inward. Flashbang grenades erupted in hallways and stairwells. Agents in black tactical gear flooded into buildings that had operated as distribution centers, money laundering fronts, and human trafficking hubs for nearly a decade without meaningful interference. The first major target was a 14-story residential hotel near the highway. What appeared from the outside to be low-income housing was, in reality, a fortified command post. Elevator access was controlled by biometric locks. Stairwell doors had been reinforced with steel plating. Security cameras covered every angle, feeding directly to monitors on the top floor where lookouts maintained constant vigilance. None of it mattered. Federal teams had studied the building's layout for months. They knew which rooms held weapons. They knew which floors served as packaging centers for fentanyl. They knew that the penthouse suite functioned as a communications hub linking Minneapolis to cartel leadership in Mexico. In 43 minutes, the building was secured. 236 individuals were detained. Among them, 179 Somali nationals present in the United States without legal status. Agents recovered 127 forged passports, stacks of prepaid cellular devices, and more than $4 million in cash hidden inside ceiling panels, air vents, and hollowed-out furniture. But the seizures went far beyond immigration violations. In maintenance rooms and locked storage units, federal teams discovered 39 firearms including assault-style rifles and loaded handguns. They found cocaine packaged in kilogram bricks. They found methamphetamine in vacuum-sealed bags ready for distribution. And they found fentanyl. Enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in Minneapolis several times over. This hotel was not a safe haven. It was an armed distribution fortress operating in the middle of a major American city. Then came the discovery that changed everything. In a reinforced basement room accessible only through a hidden staircase, agents found something they had not anticipated: server racks, encrypted hard drives, financial ledgers written in a cipher that would take analysts weeks to fully decode, and a single steel lockbox containing documents that bore the signatures of people who were supposed to be on the other side of the law. At that moment, the agents understood. They were not dismantling a street gang. They were cutting into something that had wrapped itself around the institutions of power in Minneapolis like a parasite. Let me move you forward now. 9:47 a.m. FBI Cyber Forensics Division, a secure facility in downtown Minneapolis where analysts had been working through the night on the digital material recovered from the hotel basement. The encryption was sophisticated, military grade, the kind of protection that costs money and requires expertise that street criminals simply do not possess. But federal cryptographers had been preparing for this moment. They had tools, they had time, and they had something the network did not expect them to have: a partial decryption key recovered from a previous cartel arrest in Arizona 18 months earlier. By late morning, the first files began opening. What appeared on the screens made hardened investigators go silent. The network had a name internally. They called it the Halabur Project. In Somali, Halabur means foundation, and that is exactly what it was. a foundation for cartel operations designed to transform Minneapolis into a permanent logistics hub for narcotics trafficking across the entire upper Midwest. The organizational chart was staggering. Shell companies registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and Nevada. Ghost corporations with addresses in Panama and the Cayman Islands. Charitable foundations that claimed to provide refugee services but actually laundered millions of dollars annually. Restaurant chains that never turned a profit but somehow stayed open for years. Trucking companies whose vehicles crossed state lines constantly but whose cargo manifests never quite matched what was actually inside. Money flowed in circles designed to confuse. Funds moved from cartel accounts in Mexico to offshore holdings in the Caribbean, then back into the United States as legitimate business investments. Real estate purchases. Construction contracts. Political donations carefully structured to stay beneath reporting thresholds. And at the center of this web, two names appeared again and again. The first was a man named Abdirahim Halani, 52 years old. On paper, he served as Director of Community Relations for the Minneapolis Housing Authority, a respected figure in local Somali American circles. A man who had received commendations from 3 consecutive mayors for his work supporting immigrant integration. In reality, according to the evidence now displayed across federal monitors, Halani was the regional coordinator for CJNG cartel operations north of the Iowa border. His office computer contained encrypted communications with cartel leadership in Jalisco. His bank accounts showed deposits that corresponded precisely with major narcotic shipments. His signature appeared on logistics documents scheduling the movement of fentanyl, cocaine, and human cargo through Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. The second name was more disturbing. Councilwoman Fatima Osman, 47 years old, elected to the Minneapolis City Council 8 years earlier. A vocal advocate for sanctuary city policies and reduced cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. A woman who had appeared on national television criticizing ICE operations as inhumane and racist. The evidence suggested a different story. Osman's encrypted correspondence showed direct communication with Halani regarding raid schedules, patrol routes, and enforcement priorities. Deposits to offshore accounts in her name totaled more than $2 million over 6 years. Her political influence had been used systematically to hamper federal investigations, delay warrant approvals, and ensure that cartel operations faced minimal interference from local law enforcement. This was not corruption in the traditional sense. This was not an official taking bribes to look the other way occasionally. This was command-level collusion. The city government of Minneapolis had been penetrated at its core by an organization that answered ultimately to cartel bosses in Mexico. One analyst, reviewing the final network diagram, said something that would be repeated in federal briefings for months afterward. This is not a crime problem. This is an occupation. Now let me take you to what came next. If you believe the hotel raid was the end of the story, understand that it was only the beginning. The operation was about to expand in ways that would shake the foundations of law enforcement across the entire region. 5 a.m. January 16th, Federal Coordination Center, St. Paul. A converted warehouse had been transformed into a command hub unlike anything seen in Midwest law enforcement history. Screens lined every wall. Satellite imagery updated in real time. Communication feeds from field teams created a constant hum of encrypted traffic. On the central display, a map of the upper Midwest glowed with red markers. Each marker represented a confirmed cartel-connected location identified through the ongoing analysis of seized servers and financial records. There were 73 targets spread across 6 states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, Michigan. The operation required resources that dwarfed anything previously deployed in the region. More than 1,200 federal agents from FBI, DEA, ICE, and DHS. 47 SWAT teams drawn from federal and state agencies. Black Hawk helicopters providing air support and rapid extraction capability. Armored vehicles positioned for dynamic entry. And offshore, though few would learn about it until later, U.S. Coast Guard vessels patrolling the Great Lakes to prevent escape by water. At exactly 5 a.m., the operation commenced simultaneously across all 6 states. In northern Minnesota, a reinforced farmhouse that had served as a regional distribution center was breached within seconds. Armed guards attempted to respond but were overwhelmed by flashbang grenades and coordinated fire. 2 suspects were shot while raising weapons toward agents. A federal officer took a round to his ballistic vest and continued advancing. Inside, agents discovered pallets of methamphetamine and fentanyl pills numbering in the hundreds of thousands. In Milwaukee suburbs, a converted auto shop erupted into a firefight lasting nearly 4 minutes. A suspect firing from an elevated position wounded 1 agent before being neutralized. The building contained cocaine bricks stacked to the ceiling and more than $800,000 in cash. In South Chicago, Raids struck a multi-story apartment complex used as a transit point for human trafficking operations. Suspects fled through stairwells and attempted to reach rooftops. Gunfire echoed through concrete corridors. By the time the building was secured, 17 individuals had been arrested, including 3 suspected of direct involvement in transporting migrants across state lines for labor exploitation. In Iowa, agents discovered a tunnel system connecting a rural warehouse to an abandoned farm property nearly half a mile away. The tunnel had been used to move narcotics without detection for at least 3 years. Inside the warehouse, investigators found sophisticated packaging equipment, industrial scales, and ledgers documenting shipments totaling tens of millions of dollars annually. By sunrise on the first day, the operation had produced results that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. 412 arrests. 9 cartel-connected individuals killed while resisting with lethal force. 2 federal agents wounded but stable. Seizures included more than 2 tons of cocaine, nearly 1 ton of methamphetamine, and fentanyl in quantities that investigators described as sufficient to cause a public health catastrophe. By the end of the second day, the arrest total climbed past 640 individuals. The death toll reached 24, all suspects who had chosen to engage federal officers with gunfire rather than surrender. The seized narcotics exceeded 3 tons. Cash recovered topped $47 million. Weapons numbered in the hundreds, including military-style rifles, grenades, and body armor. The underworld had taken more damage in 48 hours than it had suffered in the previous decade. But the operation was far from over, because the deepest corruption had not yet been exposed. Let me take you now into the investigation's most disturbing phase. 10 a.m. January 18th, federal investigators had begun systematic examination of the servers, financial records, and communication logs seized during the raids. What they found confirmed suspicions that had haunted honest law enforcement officers for years. The cartel had not merely bribed individual police officers. It had constructed a parallel system within Minnesota law enforcement. Officers on cartel payroll numbered in the dozens. Border Patrol agents had been compromised. State troopers assigned to highway interdiction had been receiving payments to ignore specific vehicles. Judges had been influenced to delay or dismiss cases. Prosecutors had been pressured to reduce charges. The evidence was meticulous and damning. Bank records showed regular deposits to accounts controlled by law enforcement personnel. Phone logs revealed advance warnings about raid schedules. Patrol assignments had been manipulated to create gaps in coverage precisely when cartel shipments were moving through specific corridors. One internal affairs investigator, reviewing the scope of compromise, said it felt like discovering a second police department operating inside the first one. Except the second department answered to people in Mexico rather than the citizens of Minnesota. Within 72 hours of the main raids, internal affairs units moved in coordination with federal prosecutors. 12 Minneapolis police officers were arrested. 7 state troopers were detained. 3 judges were placed under investigation. 2 mid-level officials in the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension were suspended pending charges. The arrests created shockwaves through law enforcement communities across the region. Officers who had served alongside the accused for years struggled to process the scale of betrayal. Some expressed rage. Others fell silent. Many questioned whether they could ever trust their colleagues again. Abdirahim Halani was arrested at his office without incident. He offered no resistance and no statement. Councilwoman Fatima Osman was detained at her home in the early morning hours. She demanded to speak with an attorney and invoked her right to silence. Both were charged with racketeering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, and corruption of public officials. The network that had operated for nearly a decade under the protection of legitimate authority was finally exposed. But understanding the damage it had caused would take much longer. Let me tell you now about the human cost. Because statistics alone cannot capture what this organization did to Minneapolis and the surrounding region. Federal analysts estimated that the Halibor network had moved more than 500 tons of narcotics through Minnesota over its operational lifespan. Cocaine for profit, methamphetamine for control, fentanyl for devastation. Each shipment was broken down, repackaged, and distributed into communities that had no idea they were being poisoned by an organization with connections reaching into their own government. The impact was measurable and horrifying. Overdose deaths in Hennepin County had increased by more than 300% over the previous decade. Emergency room admissions for fentanyl-related incidents had overwhelmed hospital capacity during peak distribution periods. Violent crime had spiked in neighborhoods where the network operated, as territorial disputes and debt collection turned streets into war zones. The human trafficking component added another layer of devastation. Hundreds of individuals, many of them migrants fleeing conflict and poverty in East Africa, had been smuggled into the United States through the network's channels. Upon arrival, they were trapped. Debts were fabricated. Documents were confiscated. Family members back home were threatened. These people became labor for the cartel's operations, working as drivers, warehouse staff, and lookouts with no path to freedom. Social workers who encountered victims described the psychological damage as profound. People who had risked everything to reach America had found themselves enslaved to an organization that viewed them as disposable assets. Many were afraid to seek help because they had been told that law enforcement was controlled by the same people exploiting them. The ripple effects extended into schools, where children of trafficking victims struggled with instability and trauma, into healthcare systems, where overdose patients consumed resources that could have served other needs, into court systems, where backlogged cases reflected years of deliberate manipulation. One federal prosecutor, summarizing the investigation's findings, said that the network had not merely committed crimes. It had waged a slow war against the people of Minnesota, and it had done so with the active assistance of people sworn to protect them. Now let me address what this story means. Because understanding what happened in Minneapolis requires understanding how it could happen anywhere. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it operates through silence, through procedures, through the quiet manipulation of systems designed to protect ordinary people. The Halabur network understood this. It did not conquer Minneapolis through open warfare. It conquered through infiltration, through patience, through the careful cultivation of relationships with people who could provide protection in exchange for profit. The corruption did not begin with major crimes. It began with small compromises. An officer looking the other way during a traffic stop. A judge delaying a warrant application by a few days. A politician accepting a donation that seemed legitimate. Each small compromise created vulnerability. Each vulnerability was exploited. Over time, small compromises accumulated into systemic capture. This is the danger that every city faces. Not the threat of cartels arriving with armies, but the threat of cartels arriving with checkbooks and patience. The threat of organizations that understand American institutions well enough to turn them against themselves. The operation in Minneapolis was a victory, a significant one, but it was also a warning. Because if this could happen in Minnesota, it could happen anywhere. In your city, in your state. Perhaps it already is. The question is whether anyone is watching, whether anyone is willing to report what they see, whether anyone is willing to demand accountability from officials who prefer silence to scrutiny. 24 people died during the enforcement operations that dismantled this network. All of them had chosen violence over surrender. But tens of thousands more had died in the years before, killed slowly by narcotics that flowed through a pipeline protected by people who should have stopped it. Those deaths were quieter. They happened in bedrooms and alleys and hospital emergency rooms. But they were no less real. If you have watched this far, consider what you have learned. Consider that the systems meant to protect you are only as strong as the people operating them. Consider that silence is not neutrality. Silence is permission. The curtain has fallen on the Halabur network. Its architects are in federal custody. Its infrastructure is dismantled. Its connections are exposed. But the lesson remains. Corruption thrives where oversight sleeps. And the only force powerful enough to prevent it is the collective refusal of ordinary people to accept it. If you believe this story matters, share it. If you believe accountability should follow complicity, say so. And if you believe that what happened in Minneapolis could be happening elsewhere, remember that the truth only reaches light when someone is willing to drag it there. This has been a fictional dramatization inspired by real concerns about organized crime, political corruption, and the vulnerability of American institutions. The names of officials, specific events, and operational details are invented for storytelling purposes. But the underlying question is real. How deep does it go in your city? And would you know if it had already begun?